Few dare to speak of the dark night of the soul, that silent abyss where even the most devout feel lost. Without answers, without consolation, Saint Teresa of Ávila, however, crossed this valley and revealed what no one says. It is in the deepest darkness that the soul finds true refuge in God. This is not theory, but lived experience, where fear and anxiety are transfigured by the presence of the Creator. If you feel the weight of worries, sleepless nights, racing thoughts, or the sensation of being distant from God's peace, know this: there is a hidden path, traced by Teresa, that leads from despair to hope, from emptiness to fullness. The time to seek refuge under the wings of the Almighty is now, not tomorrow. Each stage of the inner castle is an urgent call to transformation, to the courage to trust, to the promise that divine light can be born even in the densest darkness. Share your faith, explore your quest, and allow yourself to be guided on this mystical journey. The castle of the soul awaits you, and God, silent and ever-present, already dwells in the innermost recesses of your being. The dark night in the fourth mansion. Teresa's hidden struggles with spiritual aridity and emotional pain in the profound silence of the fourth mansion. Saint Teresa describes the moment when the soul, already accustomed to prayer, finds itself facing an inner darkness. It is a time of aridity, where the presence of God seems distant and the heart is enveloped in doubts and silent sorrows. The soul, like a garden without water, feels the weight of absence, and each prayer becomes a cry for consolation and hope in the darkness. At this stage, Teresa reveals that suffering is not punishment, but purification. Fear, anxiety, and sleepless nights visit the inner castle, but under the wings of the Almighty, the soul learns to trust. God's hiding place becomes a refuge for wounded emotions. A nightly prayer transforms the desert into a haven. It is here that strength in faith begins to flourish, even when everything seems barren and without answers. The mystical experience of the fourth mansion teaches that pain is a path to inner healing. Teresa guides the reader to slow down their thoughts, seek God's peace, and find spiritual security in silence. The gentle loop remains. As they traverse the dark night, the soul prepares for new lights, where divine solace is revealed and hope is reborn, opening space for the next step on the soul's journey: fear, distraction, and the battle for inner silence. Teresa's psychological insights from the first mansions. Upon entering the first chambers of the interior castle, Saint Teresa reveals that the soul's journey begins surrounded by fears, distractions, and profound doubts. The heart, still restless, struggles against racing thoughts and worries that prowl like beasts at the castle gate. Morning prayer and the desire for refuge in God become a shield against anxiety, while the soul seeks shelter in the shelter of the Most High. Teresa, with the tenderness of a caregiver, teaches that inner silence is a daily conquest. The battle against fear and distraction demands humility and trust in God, for only in this way does the soul find solace and hope in the darkness. The slow rhythm of mental prayer slows the mind, bringing inner peace and spiritual security. Even when sleepless nights threaten serenity in daily life, the contemplative practice proposed by Teresa is a remedy for emotional wounds. Prayer for the protection of the family, prayer against fear, and prayer for peace are instruments to transform restlessness into strength in faith. The gentle loop continues. Upon winning the first battles, the soul prepares to advance, guided by the inner light, towards the next mansions of the castle. The symbolism of the soul as a castle, mapping the inner journey with Teresa's mystical language. Saint Teresa, with the gentleness of one who cares, presents the soul as a crystal castle, full of light and secret chambers. Each dwelling is a space of self-knowledge, where the soul discovers its beauty and fragility before God. The inner castle is a symbol of hope, even surrounded by fears and worries. The soul is called to enter, passing through doors of prayer and silence, until it finds refuge in God. The journey through the castle is slow and full of meaning. Teresa teaches that, as the soul travels through the mansions, it undergoes processes of purification, facing distractions, doubts, and temptations. But, as it progresses, it experiences inner light, the peace of God, and spiritual security. The garden of the heart flourishes under divine protection, and each stage reveals new sources of comfort and strength in faith. In daily life, visualizing the soul as a castle helps cultivate morning prayer, prayer for family protection, and trust in God during sleepless nights. The gentle loop continues. By understanding the symbolism of the castle, the soul prepares to delve even deeper, seeking union with the Creator in the subsequent mansions, recollection, and the neuroscience of prayer. How Teresa's methods calm the anxious mind. Saint Teresa, in teaching the practice of recollection, invites the soul to enter the inner castle and silence the tumult of thoughts. Recollection is like closing the doors to the outside world, to hear the gentle voice of God in the heart. In this secret refuge, the soul finds the hiding place of the Most High, where anxiety and fear lose their power before the loving presence of the Creator. Mental prayer, cultivated with slow rhythm and confidence, acts as a balm for agitated emotions. Teresa shows that, by seeking inner stillness, the soul experiences God's peace, even amidst worries and sleepless nights. Night prayer, prayer for peace, and prayer against fear become instruments of healing, bringing spiritual security and comfort to the afflicted heart. In daily life, the practice of recollection can be applied during moments of restlessness, transforming racing thoughts into hope and serenity. The gentle loop remains. By learning to withdraw, the soul prepares itself to further deepen its union with God, discovering new sources of strength and divine protection in the next abodes. Teresa's way of perfection, humility, detachment, and the healing of emotional attachments. Saint Teresa, with the tenderness of one who leads to refuge, teaches that the path to perfection passes through humility and detachment. In the intermediate mansions, the soul is called to release the bonds of disordered affections, learning to trust in God above all human securities. Prayer for strength and prayer for healing become instruments of liberation, while the soul discovers that the true peace of God is born from trusting abandonment. For Teresa, humility is recognizing one's own fragility and accepting divine comfort in falls and weaknesses. Detachment is not indifference, but inner freedom. The soul, protected under the wings of the Almighty, learns to love without possessing, to serve without expecting anything in return. Thus, worries and anxieties lose their power to imprison the heart, and hope is strengthened in the darkness. In daily life, practicing humility and detachment is an exercise in self-knowledge and constant prayer. Morning prayer, prayer for family protection, and prayer against fear help transform emotional patterns, opening space for strength in faith. The gentle loop continues. By healing attachments, the soul prepares itself for deeper dwellings, where union with God becomes more intimate and transformative. The sixth mansion, enduring the tortures of hell. Teresa's guide to surviving spiritual collapse. In the sixth mansion, Saint Teresa reveals the abyss of inner suffering, where the soul experiences what she calls the torments of hell. It is a time of profound darkness, in which fear, anxiety, and a sense of abandonment seem to dominate the inner castle. Even so, Teresa teaches that, under the wings of the Almighty, the soul finds refuge and divine protection, even when everything around seems to crumble. The experience of the sixth mansion is marked by intense spiritual and emotional crises. Teresa describes sleepless nights, racing thoughts, and a constant struggle against despair. However, it is in this extreme suffering that the soul learns to fully trust in God, discovering that true spiritual security is not within itself, but in the shelter of the Most High. Prayer for strength, prayer against fear, and prayer for peace become anchors of hope in the darkness. In everyday life, Teresa's lesson is clear. Even in moments of inner collapse, Faith in God is capable of renewing and restoring. The gentle loop remains. By traversing the tortures of hell, the soul prepares itself for a more intimate union with the Creator, where the inner light resurfaces and hope is renewed. From illness to mystical union, Teresa's personal journey through physical and emotional darkness. Saint Teresa lived a life marked by physical illnesses and spiritual storms, transforming each suffering into a stepping stone to union with God. Her illnesses, sleepless nights, and emotional crises were not obstacles, but paths by which the Creator led her more deeply into the shelter of the Most High. Prayer for healing and prayer for strength became constant companions, while her soul learned that human frailty is an open door to divine mercy. Through her biography, Teresa reveals that fear and anxiety do not disqualify the spiritual journey. On the contrary, they are teachers of humility and trust. Each dark night, each worry that surrounded her, each racing thought was an opportunity to seek refuge in God and discover the spiritual security that transcends circumstances. Morning prayer, evening prayer, and prayer for the protection of her family were her instruments of healing, transforming suffering into hope in the darkness. In everyday life, Teresa's story teaches us that the spiritual journey is not an escape from reality, but a deep immersion in it, with faith and divine comfort. The gentle loop remains. By understanding that illness and suffering can be mystical paths, the soul prepares itself for the final abodes, where the inner light shines with renewed intensity and union with God becomes a living reality. Combating inner noise. Teresa's strategies for managing thoughts and emotions in prayer. Saint Teresa, with the wisdom of one who has already traversed the interior castle, teaches that the noise of thoughts and emotions is one of the greatest challenges to prayer. She compares the soul to a castle full of mansions, where, in the early stages, distractions and worries try to invade the sacred silence. Mental prayer, recollection, and trust in God are the keys to transforming inner turmoil into God's peace and spiritual security. Teresa advises against forcefully fighting racing thoughts, but rather gently redirecting your heart to the shelter of the Most High. The slow rhythm of prayer, the repetition of words of trust, and the surrender of worries to the Creator help the soul find solace and hope in the darkness. Night prayer, prayer for peace, and prayer against fear become daily practices to calm the mind and strengthen faith. In daily life, applying Teresa's strategies means cultivating moments of silence, slowing down the mind, and seeking refuge in God in the face of anxieties. The gentle loop remains. By learning to manage inner noise, the soul prepares to advance on the path of self-knowledge and union with God, discovering new dwellings of light and serenity. The interior castle has a map for emotional healing. 7 mansions, 7 stages of transformation. Saint Teresa, in describing the interior castle, offers the soul a map for emotional and spiritual healing. Each of the 7 mansions represents a stage of transformation, where self-knowledge, mental prayer, and inner silence lead the soul from fear and anxiety to the peace of God. The castle, made of crystal and light, is a symbol of the dignity and beauty that God grants to each person, even amidst worries and sleepless nights. The journey through the mansions is marked by challenges and triumphs. In the first, the soul faces distractions and doubts. In the intermediate ones, it learns to trust and detach. In the last, it experiences profound union with the Creator. Prayer for family protection, prayer for strength, and prayer for healing are practices that sustain the path, bringing comfort, hope in the darkness, and spiritual security under the wings of the Almighty. In everyday life, Teresa teaches that the inner castle is not just theory, but a living experience. By applying each step, the soul finds refuge in God, transforms wounds into strength and faith, and discovers that true perfection is the fruit of perseverance and surrender. The gentle loop continues as it advances through the mansions. the soul prepares for the apex of union, where the inner light shines and divine peace becomes its permanent home. Spiritual resilience in times of darkness. Lessons from Teresa's life and mystical teachings. Saint Teresa, master of the interior castle, reveals that true spiritual resilience is born in the heart of the darkest nights. Amidst trials, persecutions, and inner crises, she found refuge in God, trusting in the shelter of the Most High, even when all seemed lost. Her life testifies that strength and faith is not the absence of fear, but the courage to remain under the wings of the Creator, even in the face of anxiety and worry. Teresa teaches that hope in darkness is cultivated through constant prayer, night prayer, prayer for peace, prayer against fear. She shows that by slowing down the mind and seeking inner silence, the soul finds solace and divine protection. The peace of God, experienced in recollection, becomes a safe haven for stormy days, renewing confidence and spiritual security. In daily life, following Teresa's example means learning to transform each fall into an opportunity for growth, each suffering into a path of union with God. The gentle loop remains. By practicing spiritual resilience, the soul prepares itself to live, day after day. The promise of Psalm 91, under His wings you will find refuge, and advance, with hope, towards the light of the inner castle. The journey through the inner castle, guided by the Teresian hand, is a daily invitation to transform every fear, anxiety, and sleepless night into an opportunity to encounter God. It is not enough to merely contemplate the mansions. It is necessary to apply, with courage and tenderness, each teaching in daily life, whether in morning prayer, in the silence of the night, or in caring for the family. The path of the soul is made of small but firm steps towards the refuge of the Most High. Ask yourself, where do I seek refuge when darkness visits me? How can I slow down my thoughts and trust more deeply in divine protection? What prevents me from surrendering my worries to the Creator and experiencing God's peace that surpasses all understanding? Faith, when lived sincerely, is capable of overcoming all anxiety and fear, becoming strength and comfort even on the most difficult days. If this script touched your heart, subscribe and share your experience. Allow the light of the inner castle to also illuminate other souls thirsting for hope. Remember, under God's wings, there will always be refuge, healing, and renewal. Did you like the conclusion, or would you like to change something?